what role do you think CSR can play? But CSR is a platform today which is working in a lot of with a lot of deep issues in the country, and more so with on the healthcare side and the skill development side, and the education and employability side. But I would like to give them a certain insight from you, who's been working with this community, as to what role they can play to make the Indian corporate workplace equal for all, and include and inclusive for gender equality and identity.
So with CSR, I think we need to stop. We need to stop looking at. So we need to. I mean, with any CSR activity, very often than not, it is also about numbers, and there is also an intrinsic PR component in it. So I think, and I remember reading this. Remember reading this quote by I forget her name, Pearl Daruwala, who reading, or maybe I listened to it. I don't remember where, but from Humsafar Trust. At one of the panel discussion, where she said, I think she said, my message to all corporates sitting there is to stop treating trans people as CSR and PR activities. And I totally relate to that, what to say, the quote, because I think it's very relevant when you're talking about CSR. And having said that, I'm not sure if people have read the India Cultural Lab manifesto, inclusion manifesto. But there is also this book by Parmesh Sahani, which I highly recommend. This book actually gives you a lot more. It just gives you like a 9-step process, which talks about first have an anti-discrimination policy, active hiring policy. I know this actually is an answer to the previous question, but why I'm bringing it up in the CSR bit is, if you don't have these basic things in place, any CSR activity is just going to be like how many trees you planted. So to avoid that kind of thing, and to look at it being like a making it more inclusive to all gender identities, is to first evaluate what your CSR program is. Where is the funding going? If you have volunteerism, who volunteers for what part of it? If you're serious about looking at it from an inclusion perspective, what activities have you done? How are you sensitizing people? How are you sensitizing all the employees at in your organization? I think you have to start from there and then down, because if you don't start internally, it's not going to work well. And I remember that there have been a lot of policy for women. Like for instance, I also remember there have been some policies around, some practices or programs around engaging men in gender equity efforts. Like I think it was the Tata Jagore campaign long time back. But so some of these things, now I think it's high time that we shift focus from being, from being just sensitive to one community, but to have like a uniform approach towards making sure that you're looking at it from across different communities, across different identities. And the key here is that you need to understand that at any given point in time, a person might have multiple identities. So when you're designing programs, you have to look at an intersectional approach to designing programs. Evaluate. If you have a program where you're saying for women coming back to work after, say, maternity leave, do you have a program for the LGBTQI community after they come back from a gender affirmation surgery? Do you have something like that? If you have a financial skill program for women, do you have something like that for the LGBTQI community? So all the time, I think for a CSR program, it's extremely important to keep questioning. What are you doing? versus, I mean, what are you doing currently now, with what do you want to do? So that's why it goes all back to the whole thing about intent. Do you really have a purpose in mind, which is inclusion? Are you really determined to make changes happen that is transparent, and it will, and then that percolates across, and it's not just for, it's not just a one-time activity.